All right, so we'll get started with today's session. My name is Danielle Moon. I'm the Director of Programs and Community Engagement at APAICS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. And I want to welcome everyone for joining today's this year's first Women's Collective Office Hour. So as part of our annual Women's Collective programming, we host a series of office hours to hear from professionals who have expertise in promoting diverse, especially API women in public service. The Women's Collective mission is to increase awareness of the importance of placing more API women on all levels of public service, including elected seats. So today we're joined by Larissa Martinez with the Women Public Leadership Network. We'll refer to that as WPLN for today's session. And we're joined by June Cutter with the California Women's Leadership Association. So with that, I'll have our two amazing panelists to introduce themselves before we move ahead with the discussion. So I'll ask June to start with your introduction.
Thank you so much. My name is June Cutter, and I'm a native Californian, currently serving as president of the California Women's Leadership Association. I'm an attorney by trade. I've been a civil litigator for almost 20 years now, and I got into the political space a little after 2016 when I joined CWLA and started to serve on the board, eventually became PAC chair, was encouraged to run for office myself, and now I'm proud to serve as president and help lift up women leaders in positions of politics, government, and within their communities, and excited to be here and share what I can with you all.
I'm Larissa Martinez. I am the co-founder and president of Women's Public Leadership Network, WPLN, as you noted. My background, I have worked in politics for a very long time. We're not going to put years to that, but I've worked on the Hill for both the House and the Senate. I've worked on a number of campaigns, lobbying, kind of all the traditional things. But while I was working on campaigns specifically for women, I noticed that there was a need for a support network / pipeline to help, especially center-right women, seek public office in every state and at every level. And so I co-founded WPLN a couple of years ago, and we've been so grateful for the amazing impact of our state partners like CWLA and others in the space, watching our impact grow, watching, seeing kind of all the various people that are interested in being effective public leaders get into the space. And so that's, WPLN offers a number of different resources to help women get there. And I'm excited today for this opportunity to share a little bit more about what we're seeing on the ground and to also highlight the amazing women in the AAPI community that are stepping forward.
Great, thank you for that introduction. So I'll start with kind of your respective organization's mission. So June, I would love to hear from you about the California Women's Leadership Association and how it serves the API women, especially in California.
Sure. So CWLA was founded 28 years ago. Two women were running for Laguna Niguel City Council in Orange County, and they were told that they should stay home with their kids. So they decided that they would run for office, win, and start CWLA to lift other women up and help them on the center right get elected to office. And since then, we've grown into an organization with over 600 members throughout the state, and we are proud to partner with other organizations like WPLN and advance the mission as much as we can to help kind of take away the obstacles and the challenges of running for office for all women. Specifically with regards to AAPI women, we've always been a strong organization that supports all minority women running for office. Here in California, it's very unique because our Republican Party chairwoman is a Latina and first Latina chair of the party. And she's broken down a lot of barriers for all women of color. And we also have Congresswoman Young Kim and Congresswoman Michelle Steele as members of our organization from back when they were in the Assembly and on the County Board of Supervisors, respectively. And of course, we have lots of members who are AAPI women who are working in the political space, whether that be as a candidate or as staff. So we like to encourage everybody to come to the space and also pull from everyone's experiences and make sure that AAPI voices are represented, which I feel like in California is a lot easier than other parts of the country, but here to be a resource for everyone.
Great, thank you for that. So Larissa, I'll hand it to you to talk about WPLN's priorities and its core missions.
Sure. So the mission of WPLN is to educate, organize, and inspire center and right-leaning to seek public office and then be effective once they're there. So obviously it's a pretty big goal. It's a big mission because 69% of American women right now identify as center or right of center. So when we talk about the women that WPLN is outreaching to, it's a pretty big swath across the country. But you know, we tend to approach it in a very one holistic way in terms of as many parts of the ecosystem we can address as we can, whether it be through you know, a number of different types of resources, these support networks, helping them connect and figure out what's the best position for them, make them feel comfortable and confident in reaching their goals, whatever that may be in their political journey. One of the things that makes us pretty different than other orgs is that instead of having state chapters, we have state partner organizations like CWLA in California. So we support through grant funding, we incubate new organizations, we help in programming, marketing. You know, CWLA is amazing because they kind of lead the charge in the space. They've been doing the work for so long. And have really, you know, refined and defined what it looks like to be a strong organization helping center-right women. But we are looking to create kind of those type of models across the country. So we have 11 organizations right now in different states. But when it comes to the resources that we provide, as I mentioned, if we have an organization in your state, we want you to get engaged with them. And these are 501c3s and C4s. But we also have a number of online resources. We have an online platform that's free to access with 70+ videos and downloadable worksheets, community forums, places to connect and really get a sense of what you think may be the best next step for you in your political journey. And so that's what WPLN does. That's kind of how we have our resources, but we have a number of different programs we're doing all the time, including our upcoming Mother's Day celebration of Moms on the Trail with a number of great programs. So we continue to try and find as many free events as we can and create as many organizations and states that really can get at the needs of the women in their particular communities. Because obviously, as I'm sure you know, what works in Maine doesn't always work in California.
It always gets me so excited when I hear of these wonderful opportunities that are available for you know, women and you know, especially for diverse women. So thank you guys for providing that kind of platform for our community. So I want to move on to kind of going into more details about experience running for office, because I know that's something that is, you know, intimidating for most people to think about, that it's a daunting task to understand how to run for office and you know, launching your campaign strategy and all that. So so June, I want to start with you since I know you have experience running for campaigns. So what do you think are some unique barriers that API women face as candidates?
I think the biggest barrier is underestimating ourselves and wondering if we can do it and how people are going to react to us as AAPI women running for office. In participating in a lot of forums with Larissa and the other groups that we work with, I've noticed that a lot of people seem to think that being a minority or being a woman is something that holds you back. I think we really need to change the mindset that it's an asset that you bring to the table, because you're being a voice and representing the values of other minorities and other women who need you in that space. So I think that for me, the unique thing is when I listen to women who think that those are hindrances or barriers, I've personally shifted the narrative for myself, and I think of it as an asset. And I think here in California, we're really fortunate that the powers that be think it's an asset too. So if you look at the California Republican Party and probably the Democrat Party too, they are looking for minorities. They are looking for women. As they often say, they're looking for candidates that represent their communities, that look like their communities and have the same shared experiences and values. When I first ran for office in the 2020 cycle, my district that I ran in for the state assembly was 33% Asian American, which I didn't even know when I jumped into the race, and it turned out to be a coincidence, but it was that opportunity to be a candidate who looks like your community, who relates to the experience of the community. So I think that we really do need to kind of turn around the narrative. And if you are an AAPI woman and you want to run for office, do not think of it as something that holds you back. I think also that you have to embrace where you come from and the story that you and your family have to tell, and be able to share that. A lot of us kind of try so hard to blend in or to become part of like the mainstream that we don't talk about where our family came from. I personally never even thought of sharing my parents' story of immigrating to the United States until I became a candidate. And I realized that it's such a powerful story and it represents so much that of what America stands for. And we tend to shy away from it. So I would say that the advice is to embrace where you come from and what you stand for and your life experience.
And can you share, why you decide to run for office?
Sure. Well, I had never even thought about doing it, actually. And I was really involved in CWLA, serving on the board and running the PAC, when our representative in the state assembly switched parties 42 days after he had been elected into office in 2018. And we had always reached out to him as a women's organization saying, you really need to reach out to women voters and you really need to engage with the moms in our community. And wouldn't you know, a soccer mom from a local neighborhood park decided that she was going to run for office, and she got within 600 votes of him. And so what does he do? He runs scared and he switches parties. And I was like, we told him what he needed to do. He refused to do it. And now he's turning his back on what we thought were the values he was representing. So I said, we need to find a Republican mom to run against him. And we looked around the room and everyone was like, well, you're a Republican mom, you should run against him. And I was like, I should. And that's kind of just how it all came to be. And once I started jumping from being a supporter or being a donor, or, just kind of being the one who makes the phone calls in the background and is supporting a candidate, the switch to being an actual candidate didn't seem that hard. And now that I like to say, once you see something, you can't unsee it. So I guess I can never get out of this space, because whether I'm a candidate or I am supporting a candidate, there seems like there's so much work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always important to have that support who's willing to advocate and, push for you to run for office. Because I know, you always have to consider so many factors when you're running for office. And, if you start thinking about a long list of things, sometimes it's really difficult to make that decision. So sometimes you have to get a group together who will literally tell you, you have to run for office.
And just jump in, just do it.
So, so for Larissa, I want to frame the question slightly differently. So, in your point of view, based on your experience providing a lot of support and resources for women to run for office, what do you think? How do you think the voter assessment differ for API women who are running for office? So, voter assessment like electability, likability, and qualifications.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I just need to echo everything that June said, because I obviously, as someone who is API running for office, she has a firsthand experience and knowing kind of what that experience is like on the trail. And I just want to put it out there to anyone that is looking to run, to go check out what she's been doing, because regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, she has been so creative and very in the forefront of how to bring her experiences, especially as a mom, to do different ways to engage her community in her race. So I just wanted to put that out there, that it's been really fun to watch her put herself out there. So excuse me, to echo what June said, I do feel like one of the things that WPLN very much promotes is reflective democracy. We want a more reflective democracy. We want more voices and perspectives at the table when policy is being made. And I do agree with her that a lot of people, that is also what they're looking for. They're looking for people that are going to connect with them. And I think that is actually more important than some of these, additional barriers. And not to say that you aren't going to experience, depending on where you're running or what office you're running for, some cultural challenges here and there when it comes, especially if you're in a community that is, not used to seeing a female or an AAPI female running for office. You may have a few additional questions kind of thrown at you. But in terms of electability, so much of this is whether or not they feel you connect to the community. Do you listen to them? Do you feel like you're approachable? And I use that term because I feel like we hear a lot about likability. And I think it's less about whether or not they like you and more, do they feel as though you will represent them well and can they approach you? I mean, you are asking to be a public servant, right? You're asking to represent someone in office. While you're in office, you want to feel as though they can come to you with any of their issues, that they can, have access to you, that they know that you're listening to their problems, their issues, the things that they like, which obviously, as we know, is not always what they come to you with, or the things that they like that you've done. It's usually the other way around. But even still, I think it's more or less, can you connect to your community? And I think if you make that case and you get out there and you work hard and you find ways to introduce yourselves and connect, especially if, it's not even a matter of whether you're a woman or you're API, it's also, going into different parts of your community that you may not have a direct connection to because you just haven't either lived there or you haven't, gone to school there or whatever it is that connection is required. But if you go in, with open ears, so to speak, and really feel like you can be there for them, to me, that is really the most important piece. And I think to June's point, it's really that confidence that you can do this. And if you go in feeling as though you can, you'll be able to get there. I really do think the barriers are more in your mind, but that again is not to sugarcoat that there will not be some challenges on occasion. But I find that the challenges aren't nearly as hard to overcome as the barriers to just getting involved to begin with that some women place in their own minds.
Yeah, I think maybe like instead of like likability, maybe it's like a supportability, something that is less, because it's, likability kind of does have that connotation of like, like the middle school environment, like you're trying to get the popularity vote, right? So
yeah, well, and to your point, it's not as if people, I think it's just a term that's used out there, but likability for men and women is very different, just in the way that we use it culturally. It's not even on the campaign trail, just in life, which is why I like to say approachability, because I think it's more about that. Men, it's like, can I go grab a beer with him is what their version of likability is. And for a woman, likability can be, do I think, she's a nice person? Do I like her outfit? Does she look like she did her hair today? All of those things. But I think if you ask though, do you think she's approachable as a public leader? Then most of the time the answer is yes. You know what I mean? That it's not all the other stuff that tends to kind of cloud our perceptions of women in office.
Yeah. So I want to get more into like the kind of like the mechanics of campaigns a little bit. So June, I want to switch back to you in your campaign experience. So and you touched on a little bit about how you had to shift your campaign style and messaging a little bit. So what are some skills that helped you in your campaign, and what are the skills that you think that maybe you can improve on and make changes based on your experience?
Well, I think that one of the best skills that really helped me campaigning is real world experience. Like I said, legal experience for almost 20 years. And I've own my own business, and those things where you kind of see the challenges that people face on a daily basis. Being a mom, being a PTA president, seeing the inner workings of our public school system, and also volunteering in the community, all of those life experiences were really valuable in learning how the issues impact the community. And I think it's really important as a candidate to be able to dig into the issues. You should understand, if you're running for the legislature, you should be aware of every bill that's being discussed. If you are running for city council, you should be listening to city council meetings, and you should really understand what job it is that you're running for. And I think because I was able to understand for so many years, how the laws change every January and how they impact businesses and individuals in the community, I was able to more quickly adapt to being a part of the legislative process, or at least understanding how it works and how every single bill that was coming down was actually going to trickle down and impact everyday people. And I think another really important skill is just maybe something a little bit more inherent, but empathy and the ability to kind of understand where other people are coming from. Like Larissa said, sometimes people will come and tell you nice things, but more often than not, they're coming to you to complain. So instead of being defensive about people's negative comments or their reactions to you and what you stand for, the ability to empathize and understand where they're coming in from and why their life experience might be different than yours, and to be able to have that willingness to hear them out, I think is really important too. And campaigns are driven by money, whether we like it or not. So the ability to just put your pride aside and ask people for money and donations to your campaign, that's a really hard one for a lot of candidates to overcome. And I guess an interesting side note is that I raised so much money the first time I ran for office that a lot of people asked me to come and raise money for them. And so it kind of turned into a political fundraising and marketing business that I opened in 2021. And I was able to raise almost $2.5 million for Republicans in California last year because of just having that ability to connect with people. And I think also that applies to asking for donations too. Don't just assume that somebody's going to give you money because you have the same political affiliation or because they gave to another candidate in your district. I think people need to understand that people skills and the ability to listen to people and what's important to them serves you well, both on the policy side and the fundraising side. So those are really important skills to develop. And you kind of have to just be okay with being uncomfortable, both in the policy sphere, when you're having a candidate forum or a debate, or people are asking you for an interview, or just, having a community coffee and people ask you the really hard questions. You just have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Same goes for raising money as well.
Yeah, not to scare you off or anything, June. I feel like when we talk about these things, it's always that feeling of no, we promise you can do it. But that's why I think you have to have such strong convictions, and that this is a calling to do this, because it is, there's some fun moments, right?
I think it's all fun, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can never emphasize enough about the importance of fundraising. That is such an important part that is, not being emphasized enough in the for women running for office. So thank you for pointing that out, along with other excellent points about running for office. So Larissa, I want to pose a similar question to you. So what do you think, aside from what June mentioned, although she mentioned all the important points, but what do you think are really important skills to run a campaign?
Yeah, so I echo obviously everything that June said. I think to add to it, I always go back to the listening part, which is what she was talking about with empathy as well, which is that you really need to be able to have a skill where it's not just that you're quietly standing there, that you're an active listener, that you are, that you're making an attempt to to really engage with different parts of the community that you may not normally engage with. And I think, you always talk about all the usual things like public speaking and, networking, fundraising, all of these, skills that you need. But a lot of it can be learned while you're on the trail. You don't have to be an expert in it. And I think that's one of the things that we talk a lot about. Women have to be asked 7 times to run, that they feel like they have to be an expert in everything. They have to know all policy. They have to know exactly what they're getting into, which is one of the reasons why WPLN and CWLA exist, are to provide those opportunities to learn while also trying to reinforce that you don't have to have the answers to everything immediately. Every campaign is different. Every office is different. People are different. So, when you go out there, you should have an idea of the general makeup of what you need to do while you're out there on the campaign trail. And you actually should want to do the job that you're trying to put yourself forward for, actually like people. I hate to say that, but you need to like people. You're trying to be a public servant. You need to like actually engaging with folks, as June mentioned, feeling energized, going to events, feeling like, that you like to talk to folks and engage with them and hear where they're coming from. But a lot of the skills that you need, you'll learn as you go, and they'll become more refined. You'll get better. There's a ton of people that'll be helpful to you out there, help you get there. I think public speaking is probably the second best thing that you need to get better at. So as long as you're growing at it, because you do have to be able to effectively communicate with the people that you're looking to engage, you need to be able to share with them your story, your why. Especially if you get into that office, if you have to make difficult decisions, you have to have that trust built up that you're communicating well, that you do what you say. Obviously, I always recommend never to promise things. don't promise, but you can certainly make it very clear where you are from a principal position and where your convictions are, and knowing that's what leads you in any decision that you make. And then being able to take that trust that you build on the campaign trail and see it actually happen once you get into office, and be able to, continue having that confidence in you that you're making decisions on behalf of this community, that you're doing what you think is best based on the principles you talked about on the trail. But again, I feel that pain, because there are so many skills that you need. There's so many things that you'll learn on the trail, but you don't have to be perfect at any of these things in order to step forward and run initially. It's more or less being very clear that you know what you're getting into in terms of, you want to do this, you want the job that you're asking people to vote for you to do, you actually want to engage with people, and you feel like you can do it. There'll be other people to help you get there, and other resources available as you're looking to continue on.
Yeah, I think it's so important to do the self-reflection piece, but also, like Larissa said, knowing who can be helpful for you, because you can't run a campaign by yourself. So that means, you need to get a good group of people who are willing to be supportive and helpful, including improving on, the skills that you need, and getting the support to successfully run your campaign. So I appreciate all the long list of, skills that would people would need to run for office. So I know, Larissa, you mentioned, WPLN is, planning on having something special for Mother's Day. So I want to move on to that topic. So Larissa, I will start with you. I know you published a book with your sister called My Mommy is a Candidate. So I would love to hear more about that book and kind of how you got the idea to publish one.
Sure. So excited that we wrote this children's book. It's just recently published at the beginning of the year. Self-published, I should note. Fun process. It's very different than running a nonprofit. But we came up with it because my sister is a teaching artist. So she goes into schools and uses children's books as tools to teach on a number of different topics to a number of different ages of children kind of across the country, especially in Georgia, which is where she's based. And so we have always been talking about how there is a lack of books out there that really help mothers or parents be able to explain to their kids what they do for a living, right? There's a number of books that talk about you too can be a candidate, or you too can be president, all of these pieces. But what about what does it mean though if your mom is the CEO of a company or a lawyer or, any of these kind of other professions? And because I live in the candidate world, I was taking that conversation and thinking through just even on the candidate side, there's not a lot of tools that help explain what it is to be on the trail to your kids and to help them feel engaged in what you're doing. So I kind of took my experience from what the trail looks like what are your general things that you do, activities day to day. And then my sister took that and translated it into kids speak, so to speak. So the way that we approach the book is very much through highlighting the leadership skills needed to be an effective candidate, and then translating those to what the kid does every day. So for example, my mommy is a leader, and then the next page is the kid being a line leader, because likely that is what they do day to day when it comes to getting on the school bus, right? Or my mommy is a great teammate, and I also am a great teammate, and showing the child playing soccer and being part of the team, right? So finding ways to equate what the mom does every day as a leader, but to what the kid is also learning in terms of those skills, and then being able to hopefully translate that so that there is a feeling of involvement, so the kid doesn't feel like the mom is just off. And June can speak to that too. There's a lot that you have to balance when you're a mom on the trail, or just a mom in any capacity, but then this one for a trail. And your kid is like, well, why can't you make it to my soccer game? Or why do we have to spend another weekend at this parade? Or why are we doing this? And I think it's helpful to have this as a tool to help parents, but moms specifically, translate what they do. And then plus, I hate to say it, but it makes hopefully the child also see their mom in a different light, right? They get to see that their mom has these very formidable skills that, not just be a candidate, but just in life. And I think both of those are helpful. So that's kind of how we approach it. It's very non-political. The only thing you see are vote, just vote. There's no colors, there's no anything. We tried to make sure we were representative of all different, demographics of people and places. And we try to be very inclusive. So it's not a right leaning and not leaning book. My sister is left leaning, I'm right leaning. I mean, it's just meant to be a tool in general, be helpful to any parent out there that's running for office, specifically moms.
And my 12-year-old will tell you that it is a very accurate and delightful book.
Thanks, June. Yeah.
That's so great. So June, I would love to hear about your side of a view of, what it was like running as a mom. And I know it's a tough conversation, especially if your kids are younger, to help them really clearly understand, what it is that you're doing. And, again, Larissa mentioned, why can't you make it to my soccer games? And, having that candid conversation. So I would love to hear, your stories and kind of your experience being a mom as a candidate.
So the first time I ran for office, it wasn't really planned out. So we as a family just jumped into it. And I think one of the most helpful things for me is my husband, who is an amazingly supportive partner. He doesn't like to go out and do the political things, but he is great at holding down the fort. So someone's always at the soccer game, even if it isn't me. But it's interesting because I think my kids are the perfect age for me to run for office, because they're not so young that I need to be there for them all the time, but they're not so old, like if they were in high school or college, where the things that I do and the decisions that I make would impact them and their social life. I know that there was a mom candidate a couple of years ago here in San Diego, and she had kids in high school, and they were constantly picked on at school for the things that their mom said, or things that their mom may have been accused of, even if it was true or not. And that was pretty much imputed on the kids because they were old enough to have those kinds of discussions with their peers. So I'm really lucky that my kids are 12 and 9. They were 9 and 6 when I ran the first time. So it's also interesting because I have one kid who's super into it and one kid who wants nothing to do with it. So my daughter, she's 12, she's almost 13. She loves every aspect of campaigning. She loves Larissa's book. My son could probably care less. Sorry, Larissa, but he wants to do his thing. He's 9. He wants to go play baseball. He wants to hang out with his friends. Knocking on doors with mom on the weekend sounds like a terrible way to spend his time. Whereas my daughter loves to carry the clipboard and come with me and knock on the door. And I think that it's been inspirational for her as well, and breaks down the barriers of what she thinks a woman or an Asian American or, you know, a mom can do, and shows her a window into things that she might be able to accomplish should she decide to go into the political sphere or any other sphere. So it's been great seeing the campaign through her eyes. And sometimes she'll make comments, and, you know, it's really interesting to see how she perceives things from the lens of a 12-year-old. But it was a little harder the second time around, because you understand the sacrifice that it's going to take, and they understand how often mom's going to be gone and what it really means for our family and our family dynamic. So it was, when I was filing to run for the second time, I asked my daughter, okay, so are you excited about mom running for office again? And she's like, I'm excited, but I'm also a little sad because I won't see you as much. And it was a little bit heartbreaking, but we had to talk it through and understand that our family makes sacrifices for the greater good. And this is one of the sacrifices that we're going to make. Luckily, she's old enough to understand that. But you know, the sadness passes and she's back at it, excited about working on the campaign to stuffing envelopes and, you know, addressing things and folding shirts and doing all the little things that she's able to do at her age. But I think that there's nothing better that you can do as a mom than be an example for your kids of what a woman can accomplish, whether your child is male or female, whatever, you know, wherever you live, whatever your socioeconomic status might be, whatever ethnicity you are, like it's just a way to show your kids that the barriers can be broken. And I think it's like the greatest example. And everyone should buy Larissa's book because it's wonderful.
Thanks, June. Danielle, one of the things too, just kind of going off of that, is I think it is really important, and something that is not talked about enough is, and you brought it up earlier, is how to support the support system, right? And I think for AAPI women specifically, you know, in terms of having strong family units around them, making sure that the family knows what's about to happen. Which is one of the reasons why, and I know I'm being selfish here and promoting our celebration of moms on the trail, but it's because we are including a spouses and family program for them to come on and learn a little bit about what that's like, what to expect, kind of best tips for dealing with things, you know, like what happens if you see your mom being attacked on social media, you know, to like the spouses attending events, like, you know, expectations if someone gets mad at your, you know, your wife or your spouse, like, how to deal with that and how to do it in a respectful way. And then we also are doing a book reading, and all of them are free to attend, but we're doing a book reading on Friday. So.
Yeah, just to add really quick, speaking of families, I think what was unique to my experience as an AAPI woman running for office is that this is something my parents never expected from me. I mean, when they came to the United States in 1968 and started building their life here and putting me through school, this is not part of the plan, right? I gave up a professional job, a career as a lawyer, and now I'm in politics, which in a lot of Asian cultures is not, you know, the best place to be. So getting your family on board is so important, but also understand that your parents might not, whether you're 14 or 40, your parents might not understand why you're making that choice and why you would do that to yourself, right? To put yourself in a sphere that can sometimes get a little nasty, and to put yourself in the public eye, and, you know, just kind of being exposed out there as a family. It might be hard for them to grasp or come to terms with. I mean, my parents have come around to accept that I do this now, but for them at first, I think it was a pretty big shock.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have like these transparent conversations with your family. because, you know, we all have to experience it, right? Any candidate who runs for office, whether they have, you know, they're married or they all have families that they will be kind of exposed in to a certain degree. And so it's so important to have that collective conversation. And going back to June's point about, you know, like being comfortable with uncomfortable situations, right? To just kind of best prepare for any scenarios, whether, you know, attacking, you know, your spouse or, you know, your family members. Those are really sensitive situations. But if you're prepared enough, and going back to the support part, if you have the support network who can help you kind of overcome these challenges and barriers that may come at you, you know, attacking your family members or, you know, part of your identity. These are, I think, a really important part of the exercise. And I really appreciate both of you for sharing in June, you know, particularly sharing your personal story coming from your experience. I hope that this will encourage a lot of our networks and people listening in that, you know, they're not alone. These are all the things that any candidate has to, you know, think about and best prepare. So with that, we're coming to a close. So I wanted to ask both of you for any last thoughts, you know, advice, recommendations for API women thinking about running for office.
Well, I'll go first and I'll have June end it since she's closer to all the things. But my only thing is that, you know, you can do it. And there's a lot of resources. There are a lot of people there that are willing to be helpful, whether it be WPLN or one of our associates, but there's a lot of other organizations that are also exist that are there to be helpful, to be resources, you know, to make sure that you do feel like you're well prepared to make the best choice for you and your family. So, you know, I hate to say it, but there's all this conversation around, you know, what to expect, what to do. And it can be a little daunting if you're not quite there yet. But just knowing that, you know, there are a lot of ways to get engaged and be an effective public leader, whether it be appointments, elected office, all different levels, you know, different places to engage. And so, you know, feel free to start small. Don't feel like you have to run for Congress immediately, you know, but that there are ways to find those supports. And there's a lot of resources out there. And yeah, I think it's a good experience no matter what the outcome, to put yourself out there and feel that calling for public service.
To add on to that, not only can you do it, but if you're willing to make the sacrifice, there are people out there counting on you to do it too. And I think that I personally feel a lot of gratitude for AAPI women who have forged the path for me. And I am, you know, hopeful that I can forge a path even further for AAPI women, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. And I think that, you know, it's hard work and it is sacrifice and it is a life-changing experience. But if you're willing to do it, imagine the impact you can make on your community and on not only the AAPI community, but your community as a whole. And especially as women, I think that it's important for us to know that we can do it. And so, and there's other women counting on you to set the example, especially the future generations like my daughter and your kids out there. So you can do it, you should do it. And if you need help and you live in California, CWLA is here to help you.
Great. Thank you so much both for sharing your expertise and stories today. June, I hope I see your daughter in the campaign trail in 20, 30 years. But in the meantime, I hope to see you know, increasingly more diverse women running for office. Like Larissa mentioned, you know, you don't have to start from Congress. You can start small because they all, you know, will make a difference. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And I want to thank for participants who signed on today. So our next office hour will be in June. So please look out for any updates for that. And thank you and see you all soon.